Welcome to the Therapeutic Food Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Marian Mitchell. I'm an integrative nutrition health coach, therapeutic diet expert, and founder of The Road to Living Whole. There are many different diets out there. It's hard to know which one is right for you with your chronic illness and autoimmune disease. In this podcast, I'm going to share with you the foundational pieces every single therapeutic diet out there shares, and also how to use the best one for your particular diagnosis. If you've been looking for a meal planning partner, help navigating the complicated healthcare system, and want to feel better quickly, I'm your girl. Grab your kombucha and notebook. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today I have such a fun interviewee guest for you. His name is Joe Stout, and he loves to talk about sustainable agriculture and farming and nutrition. And I am just ready to pick his brain apart because I've had some guests on that have had some very different and conflicting thoughts on regenerative farming, sustainable farming, the labels for that, what that means, what that looks like, bureaucratic tape. And then also just the effect that it has on nutrient density in food. And I think that there's just so much conflicting information out there that we kind of feel damned if we do, damned if we don't. And so I kind of want to give you a solid place to get some good information and make some decisions from there. Because no matter what, eating healthy is good, but there's a way that we can start making our food and making choices with our money that are going to support more nutrient dense, sustainable, regenerative farming methods and food and all of that. So Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Marian. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited if you cannot tell. I'm just like gushing right now. I'm so excited. So tell us about yourself. How did you arrive to the where you are? What do you do? What is your expertise? And let's just kind of dive into the topic of the day.
Great. That sounds like a good place to start. So, yeah, my name is Joe Stout. I'm married, got a wife named Elizabeth. We've been married for about 18 years now. We have 10 children, six girls and four boys. And we live in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State on a 500 goat dairy. We actually live on the farm with my parents, so there's actually three generations living on the farm. And I grew up on a goat dairy here in Washington State. It was actually a different one, but I've been around goats basically my entire life, and I've always lived on farms, except for a brief period where my wife and I had first gotten married. I also have a couple of degrees in nutrition, so I got a bachelor's of science in nutrition, and then a master's of science in nutrition as well. And so farming and human nutrition are a couple of passions of mine for sure. And in particular, permaculture and sustainable food systems are things that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and seeking to implement not only with our farm and business, because our farm that has all these goats, it's connected to a business called Mount Capra, and Mount Capra produces all kinds of nutritional products from goat milk. All the milk we produce goes into these nutritional products, but we also work with other farms as well over across the West Coast and actually out in the Midwest as well. So we're not only impacting our own farm, but we're also a part of these other farm systems that are here in the United States.
That is so cool. Like, I just like, it's so funny because I'm such a city girl, but like, it's kind of the dream to just like live on a farm with multi generations and raising the kids. I went to college in the South and I had a boyfriend that lived on, it was once a 100-acre farm and then it was a 20-acre farm by the time I got there. And, there was just a long, windy road that had different houses with different family members living on it. And they were a cow, they would raise them and then send them off to be slaughtered, sold at auction. So, and that's like the extent of my knowledge, right? And being a health coach, I'm always trying to get people to eat food that comes from the earth as close to the earth as possible, right? Minimally processed, nutrient dense. I went on this whole like health journey, trying all the different diets out there and trying to increase my nutrients as much as possible, and kind of settled on a paleo type diet, which kind of merged my love of animals and wanting them to be humanely raised and humanely slaughtered on a natural diet, not a CAFO type thing, and nutrient density, anti-inflammatory, chronic illness, all of that. So that's kind of where I've settled. For the most part, I consider myself a moderate when it comes to nutrition, but I do think that where a lot of confusion comes in is sustainable agriculture doable on a mass scale to feed the United States? And is it all that we hope that it could be for our health?
Yeah, those are good questions. So to answer your first question, is it doable? It absolutely is doable. The U.S. used to be a nation of farmers at our founding, and up until like maybe I want to say maybe 125 years ago, I think the nation was about 95% people were involved in agriculture in some portion, and now it's less than 4% actually do farming now. So sustainable agriculture is going to look a lot different today than it did 100 years ago when everybody was kind of closer to the land and people as they do kind of dwell more in cities than they do out in rural areas. And early in our history, land was very, very cheap in the US, and those days are kind of over now. So it's very hard to find like, and especially farmland is oftentimes seen as like prime real estate for housing. So
Well, housing and investors, really.
absolutely.
Like, think about Bill Gates buying up
Yeah.
so much farmland,
Yeah.
and like that just angers me inside. But I
Yeah.
also know that I believe that there's like those big companies like BlackRock and all of that that buy them up to hold
Mm-hmm.
because and drive
Yep.
up the price
Yep.
of land.
Yeah.
Um,
And at least with Bill Gates, at least he's an American citizen. You got the
right.
Chinese buying up hundreds of thousands of acres of prime farmland, and I just don't understand why
So
why
my
that's allowed.
dad My dad said that it's to help pay back our debt to them, that our soil is so rich that it's kind of part of the interest rate because we don't bring in enough tax revenue,
Mm,
right? So that's what he's told me. My dad's like
sure.
former military and all of that,
Okay.
and it makes sense. I don't know how true it is. I believe him,
Sure.
but I've just heard that that's a theory.
Yeah.
But also, like here in Arizona or in southern Arizona, like a Middle Eastern company was like draining all of our water
Yep.
down there. So the farms all of a sudden weren't having water for their cattle and all of that. So yeah, the foreign interests are conflict. Definitely, America last.
Yeah, yeah, miracle lasts for sure. It's what, but to your question, is it possible? Absolutely, it's possible. We're the country that pays out billions of dollars in farm subsidies to have farmers not grow crops. So we absolutely have the money. We absolutely have the resources, and to emphasize healthy food systems, sustainable food
Hmm.
systems, if we have the political will to do it. Problem is, and this is hopefully not just old man yelling at the clouds, but the problem is that because so many politicians are bought and paid for by a lot of these corporations that are kind of controlling the food supply, it is very difficult to make some of those top-down changes that would need to happen because on its face, the economics of like family farming, they just don't make sense anymore. And
Right.
farming has always been an economic area where the state or the government has had an active hand all throughout history because feeding
Hmm.
your own people is a prime concern of the government. So it's not a new thing to have the government involved. But back in the 1980s, there was a guy by the name of Earl Butz, and great name by the way. But Earl was I believe he was the Secretary of Agriculture at the time, and his focus was the industrialization of the U.S. U.S. farms. And so he had a mantra. He said, "Get big or get out." And so essentially, it was in the 80s that much of the consolidation of family farms into corporate farms happened.
Hmm.
And so there was a time within living memory where you could have a family farm that was actually if you worked hard and you were a good farmer, you could actually support your family, not only feed them from your farm, but you could also support them with
Financially.
yeah, financially as well. Most people who get into farming now essentially have to view it as like a really expensive diet that they have to subsidize with some type of job because the economics of producing food is that they don't make sense on a purely economic scale. And so in order for sustainable agriculture to be adopted in a nation, kind of in a large nation way, we would need some top-down administration who were committed to subsidizing to stop subsidizing the Black Rocks and the Chicoms from actually holding this. Whether or not it's because we owe them or not, I don't know. That your dad's probably right. But are our people and their health of the paramount importance for our government? And it just the answer has to be yes. And if it's not, then we
Right.
just need new leaders. And so it can happen, but not without like some pretty active proponents within the government, at the very least, not interfering with farmers who want to do things differently.
Yeah, I follow well, he just was in a documentary. I also think his name is Joe. It's an older guy, White Oak Farms or White Oak Pastures. Um
Okay, yes, I know. So there's Joel Salatin.
him,
Okay, yeah.
that one,
So Joel
Joe.
Joel
Yes.
Salatin's with Polyface Farms, actually.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I love Joel
I
Salatin.
just like
Great
I
guy.
follow a bunch of sustainable
Yep.
farms on Instagram and I get them all confused.
Yep.
But, he does a lot of education on Instagram,
Yep.
which I think is just like the way he does it. His social media team is amazing.
Hmm.
And he talked about how I recently saw a reel about how difficult, how you can't, the slaughtering process. Like you can raise your own animals, but to like go to a USDA facility, the cost of it and all of that. Like if he wants to just have a small local person, take process his animals, people have to buy a portion of the animal and the whole animal has to be sold before it can go
Yep.
and be processed.
Yep.
And how expensive that is because a quarter of a cow is like what, $300 to $400 at
Yep.
least,
Yep.
and then you have to have the deep freezer capacity for it. And, I know, I mean, here in my world, like in my little circle, my little bubble, I guess, like people are willing to do that.
Right.
And it's just, but it's like you can't just go and get a steak
Right.
for dinner.
Nope.
You
You
can't
you
just go
absolutely
and
can't.
get ground beef.
Yeah, it's very very difficult. Now I'm in the dairy world, which is actually
Hmm.
regulated by different federal agency. We're regulated by FDA.
Okay.
Beef is regulated by USDA. So it's not apples to apples, but we're pulling from the same sources, Marian, because we've got I listen to Joel Salatin all the time. I've read several of his books. Just the concept of lunatic farmer, it renates with my soul. So,
Yeah.
but
I put you in that same
yeah,
category
yeah.
with
Put
him,
me, yeah. I'm just much less well spoken than Joel, but Joel does, yeah, just incredible job giving great education to the public for sure. But the federal government is often just like not the federal, state governments too. They're often very antagonistic towards family farms, and I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know all the reasons why, but there's all kinds of stories you hear about out there of just little family farms getting raided by the feds for selling raw milk or
Yeah, the
yeah, the
Amish one
Amish
that
exactly.
is very recent, where they just like poured out gallons upon gallons and destroyed cheese and
Yep.
like,
Yep.
and he didn't. Then there was no complaints, there was no
Yep.
diseases that came from his farm. They just like were like, "You're not doing it right," and
Well,
yeah,
they see it as a public health hazard, and the feds, because we live in such a risk averse society, they would rather see sterilized food than potentially pathogenic food. So anytime you involve animals and the dirt, you're going to involve potential for bacteria. It
yeah,
used to be said that every 12-year-old should have eaten a pound of dirt by the time they're 12, they should have eaten a pound of dirt because those bacteria that we get in the soil are, for the most part, if you're just living in normal country, those are things that eventually make your immune system stronger.
yeah,
But because we've become so risk averse, we want to sterilize everything to make sure that food safety is the absolute number one priority. And while food safety is really, really important, and things like raw milk are easy. They're pathogenic foods if not properly handled, for sure. It's very easy for
yeah,
them to get contaminated. But at the same time, people need to have the ability to have a choice in it, accept the
yeah,
risks for what they are, and
yeah,
ask themselves the question long term, is sterilized food better for my health than the potential of a foodborne illness? And I think that's a question that you could come to different answers on, but
yeah,
right now the way our government regulators act is they don't actually give us the choice. They basically just give us sterilized food. And
yeah,
that really, I do think, can cause some long-term longevity issues for sure.
I completely agree. You actually answered a lot of the stuff that I was hoping you would answer. We are a very fear-driven society at this point in time. Unfortunately, it's very frustrating. I am one of those that I want to make my own educated decisions. That includes getting to know the farmer and their methods. And, I want to do my own risk-benefit analysis. And I truly believe that if people are educated properly without, slant, just given information here, make your decision, that, and, there's plenty of people who would want the sterilized food out of fear, but there's plenty of people who are going to go, it's worth the risk. Like maybe someone who's pregnant was probably going to want something a little more sterilized just to be safe. But then once, and maybe with like a young child, but then, as they get older and, pathogens are much less likely to be deadly, you can make your own decisions. I feel like it's not this black or white, all or nothing thing. Like I feel like the options should always be there.
Yeah.
I
That,
do have a
yeah,
question.
go ahead.
How likely is it to be a down up change? Like, getting involved at the county level and the city level and the state level. Like, I have a friend who moved to Alabama to start a farm, and they have some, their farm keeps growing. They have pigs and ducks and chickens and geese and all kinds of stuff, right? I don't know the back end, the profitness, like how much they profit, but I know that they have like a farm stand with eggs and
Hmm.
like all of this stuff. And I wonder how much of it could be consumer driven or people driven from the bottom up. Because I mean, there's been this battle for years, right?
Sure.
From the people and the moneymakers,
Yep.
right? The people, like, there's just this elitist, common people battle that's been going on since the 80s, really. I mean, of all time, of all history, but
Right.
agriculturally, the 80s and on. And I think about what organic food and the price of it used to be compared to what it is now. And when it's in season, it's cheaper than the conventional stuff.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much of it could be consumer driven. Is that even, I mean, I think it is just because look at like artificial food dyes being removed from food. And I mean,
Absolutely.
that took an administration, but it really has been a grassroots movement that's just been getting louder and louder over time.
It's absolutely needs to be from the ground up too. And what I certainly wasn't saying the top-down approach is the only way. Essentially, it's the consumer grassroots. It's the consumer grassroots movement that elects leaders that will implement change from the top. So
Yeah.
you really need both because
So term limits would be wonderful.
yeah, exactly right. But we want people who care about this stuff who
Yeah.
aren't just simply. I mean, you saw this like with the SNAP benefits when they were running out. One of the things that it wasn't exposed, but it came to the top for a lot of people's knowledge was that. Wow, the SNAP benefits, the EBT cards, they're being used to just like buy just massive amounts of just processed junk. Like
Yeah.
maybe what the SNAP benefits offer is whole foods and that's it. And
Yeah.
in you won't starve, but you also won't, become like morbidly obese because you're on government assistance because that's one of
Right.
the signs of poverty in the US is obesity. Like
Yeah.
if you are poor, you're more likely to struggle with weight and obesity than if you are in a higher socioeconomic class. So
Yeah, and one of the things I want to interrupt there is they always talk about food deserts, and this is why it wouldn't work. But the thing is people sell what the government pays for.
yep,
And so if the government's paying for whole, real foods and nothing else, well, those food deserts go away.
yep, yep,
Like, because I know people are going to be like, well, what about this? And I'm like, and I come from a government should stay in its place type of thing.
sure,
I'm a constitutionalist.
sure,
I'm not a party driven. I want the Constitution and don't go outside of your role. And it's one of those things that there wouldn't be food deserts if the government paid for it. And then I was just reading about how, a lot of SNAP benefits are used to buy fast food, but you can't buy a cooked rotisserie chicken. Cooked rotisserie chickens are my lifesaver. And I'm like, that
yeah,
should definitely be covered,
yeah,
right? But soda and chips and all those things,
right,
those are not sustainable to life.
right.
Those are, and so And everybody's like, oh, well, you shouldn't police what people eat. Well, no, the whole goal is to keep you alive. And
Well,
and
you
really,
you should have a say if you're giving them free food, you should have a say in the public health consequences that come from them, becoming obese off of the government assistance that you offered them. So,
well, that and so yeah, and then it weighs down Medicaid and it takes money away from the elderly and the disabled, but also it lowers the ability for children to learn,
absolutely.
you know.
No, you're Marian, you're touching on all the things that really matter. So it really needs to come from the ground up because that's going to be who's demanding what from our leaders. Because I've got a very strong libertarian streak in me as well, where I don't want the government like telling me, whether or not I should be eating whole milk or not. But
Hmm.
at the same time, I also recognize that the government plays this enormous role in the food supply. And so if
Yeah,
I'm being a realist, I would rather the government do not an I would rather them not be an antagonist to healthy eating, which is in a lot of ways the way they are now. Take for
yeah,
example, like school, military, and assisted living, like all of the funding that goes for food benefits there. It's all
hmm,
such antiquated nutrition. Like they still like you cannot give school age children whole milk. If a farmer could like have a surplus of 1,000 cartons of whole milk, and he could not even donate it to the school because it's full fat whole milk, and fat is bad for you. He would have to actually go off of the school grounds and give it away like in the parking lot, like a drug dealer or something. So like it's those kinds of things where the government could just be less antagonistic, and that would be at least a good start. But
yeah.
but a lot of the things that we're seeing, even with like guys like RFK, who is pushing for things like food dye removals and things like that. A lot of that came about because of consumer grassroots movements. So you
Yeah.
really just need both. Sometimes people will focus on one over the other, in what it needs to be in tandem. So
Yeah. I love that. I think that that's really encouraging. One of the things I learned, oh gosh, I don't know, 15 years ago was how important local elections are.
yes,
And those are the ones that have the worst turnout. Everybody will vote for the president, the vice president, all of that. And then when it comes to local stuff, they're just like, oh, just number two looks good. And, you know, um, I saw their picture and they looked friendly, so I'm going to pick that person.
right.
And it's really the local one is what matters most. Like you look at farming, organic farming in California versus the rest of the country and the stringent rules that they have. That was consumer driven. I do think it's a little overbearing. Again, I'm for a little bit smaller government, but when it comes to food, that is the government's role. And so, yeah, for those of us in the chronic illness world, like we need to be involved and we need to get to know our farmers. How can we help you? Who would you vote for? Who's your friend?
Yep.
And all of that. And here in Phoenix, Arizona, the farmers markets are very little food and a whole lot of knickknacks, unfortunately. But there are farmers there here, and getting to know them has been so fun for me over the years. I've seen a lot of them come and go. Unfortunately, they end up moving to other states that make it a little easier, and have pasture, have grass, things like
Right.
that. So it's a little less cumbersome of a financial burden because there's just not a lot of grass here
Mm,
in the desert.
hmm.
At least here in southern Arizona. Northern Arizona is completely different, but then you have fires and there's there's stuff
Right.
everywhere, right?
Hey, farming's hard. It's
Yeah.
it's hard enough without any government intrusion on it.
Yeah. Well, and then it's like one of the things we're allowed chickens here. So we have a lot of eggs, not a lot of meat birds, but a lot of eggs. And then, a lot of people grow backyard gardens. We grow tomatoes and peppers and squash, and we're lucky if anything else can grow.
Right. Yeah.
Citrus grows here. It takes a lot of water though. So there's just not a lot of variety. So like we have bountiful baskets. We have organic like food boxes you can buy, but ours is like a 500-mile radius.
Hmm.
And when it crosses borders, there's pasteurization and
Oh yeah.
chemicals and things that have to
Yep.
be, and they're still nutrient dense. They taste amazing, like the best pears of my life, the best tomatoes of my life, all of these things, like they taste amazing. But yeah, the stringentness, and I understand bugs. You don't want bugs that don't have natural
Right.
predators coming into your state. And so there's just this balance of I think people become such purists and so fear driven on the other end of the spectrum that it makes it almost impossible. So, what are some things that we can, as a nutrition expert, in that food fear that people have, especially in the chronic illness world, where we're like so like trying to reduce our toxic burden, we're trying to increase our nutrients, we're trying to reduce inflammation and balance our blood sugar, and it just feels like there's so much we have to do just to be healthy. It gets really exhausting. So, what matters and what can people be flexible on when it
Mm,
comes to that?
yeah, it's like you type in your symptoms for your head cold into Google, and it turns out you have brain
You're gonna
cancer.
die from
Yeah, you're
cancer.
gonna die, right? Yeah, so there is just tons and tons of fear out there for sure. And everything is gonna kill you. The copper wires in your walls are gonna kill you. It's like, and actually, I'm not even a skeptic about a lot of those things, but there is like a point at which you have to just say, I can't keep up with it all. I'm going to
Hmm.
focus on some things that are good. So, I mean, some of the most critical things are things that Marian, you already know about, and your listeners already know about. Like exercise is like the number one best thing for longevity and like current health. Like that,
Yeah,
those are the kinds of things that if because we live in an era of like everything's kind of done for you physically, we don't have physical activity generally. Most of us don't have like anything like the physical activity of our ancestors even 100 years ago. We've got to stay active. Otherwise,
yeah.
we'll find that it doesn't matter how well we're eating. We're just we're wasting away if we're not pushing our body.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a little tidbit about that because I went to a workshop with a local integrative oncologist here, and he's been doing all kinds of research. It's so fascinating. But what he has found is his people who have cancer and they have active tumors, they have metastatic cancer going on, or just the cancer cells that float in your blood. What he's found is if he can get them burning 500 calories a session, and he puts them on like 98, 99% oxygen, so they burn about 25% more calories with the same effort, that he can shrink tumors up to 50% in 6 weeks.
Hmm. Wow.
So like, exercise and then exercise kills all of the cancer cells that are floating in your body that become metastatic. And so the cancer keeps growing. It kills all of those
Hmm.
in an exercise session, and then if it keeps reducing them, you keep exercising, and then the cancer shrinks. Movement is so powerful. Like even think about us growing up in the 80s. And like you had to go find your friends. You had to go outside, ride your bike, walk around. I would not come home until the streetlights came on,
Sure.
type of thing. Kids these days, like again, it's that risk aversion. You hear one story about somebody getting kidnapped, and now everybody keeps their kids inside.
Hmm.
So kids just, and then there's no recess anymore. I remember having like an hour lunch and a 30-minute recess and then PE, and kids don't get that
Sure.
anymore. And getting them exercise is really, really difficult, which is leading to weak posture muscles. They can't sit still because they're uncomfortable, which then they get labeled ADHD. And even adults, like lower back pain is just from sitting 8 hours a day. Like
Sure.
people don't even, my husband doesn't even get up for lunch. He just sits all day. And I'm like, go for a walk,
Right.
but
Yeah.
like, yeah, we're just we are so sedentary and it truly is poisoning us
Mm.
and our health as a generation. It's so
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so and I think people sometimes can overthink the exercise thing. There one way of looking at exercise, and there's lots of different ways of looking at it, but one that I found helpful is just like the zones. You zone 1 through 5.
Hmm.
That zone 2 exercise, like doing that every day is and that's like going on a walk. I mean, that's just like
Yeah.
really low effort exercise. That's not the only thing you should do, but like if you're doing that consistently with some zone 3 and 4 interspersed throughout the week, like that is like going to be life transforming for you. So exercise is huge. Sleep is really huge. One thing that I try to really do is make sure I've got 10 kids. I don't usually get through the whole night without being like interrupted, but
Yeah.
I do try to make sure that ambient light is at its absolute lowest that it possibly can be. So,
Hmm.
turning off the computers, turning off things that are going to fill the room up with light, even a little bit, is going to be really important. So, exercise and sleep are going to be two things that if you're not doing those, Then the nutrition thing, it still matters because this is holistic. We've got to stack all of these together. This isn't just like a one magic bullet. But if you're not doing the exercise and the sleep thing well, the nutrition, all the good nutrition choices you make are going to be sabotaged in some
Yeah.
ways. So if you've got your exercise and your sleep patterns pretty well dialed in, then nutritionally speaking, try to keep your food purchases to like very like single ingredient purchases is really key. Like that's like a huge, just an easy thing to think about. How many ingredients is in this thing? And if it's got multiple ingredients, why is there so many ingredients in it? Well, maybe it's a bag salad or something, and so it's like it's still all basically whole foods, that kind of thing. But like
Yeah.
you think about nutrition. And there's this whole idea of bio-individuality. Like each person is a bio-individual. And that's true, except for you are really like your genetics. You're like your parents, you're like your grandparents. So if you think about like how your great-grandparents ate, if you ate like that, then you would probably eliminate a lot of the modern day food problems that a lot of modern day problems that people have that come from food because you have a genetic predisposition that has been given to you from your ancestors. And so one of the crazy things about living in the modern world is that we live in a world of hyper palatable food. Like our brains don't know what to do with like a Big Mac from McDonald's. Whether you think it's
Yeah.
good food or not, it's very. If you think about it from the standpoint of like, if what would your grandparents think, or your great grandparents, or great grandparents think of things like something from Taco Bell or some processed pizza from the grocery store? Well, they probably wouldn't think it was the worst thing in the world because it's filled with salt, fat, and sugar. And if you put salt, fat, and sugar into anything, your brain is going to tell you this is good and you should eat more of it. And in fact, because we have a winter coming and we want to keep you alive through the winter, you should eat as much of this as you possibly can. Because in the old days, if you came across, this is the whole idea of eating what was in season. Sometimes you ate really well, and sometimes you didn't eat so well. And so your brain is constantly looking for the things that it most often craves during the lean times, and that's salt, fat, and sugar. That's why
Hmm.
our modern food supply is so incredibly addictive because that's what they cook, that's what they make all of these processed foods with. So
Yeah.
really limiting yourself to not like hyper palatable foods will help a great deal. There is some really fascinating studies that have been done where even in World War II, you would have people because the brain is so wired to look for variety, and it can be short-circuited by processed food. Processed food short-circuits the brain into thinking it's gotten variety, when in fact it's just gotten another version of some type of processed extruded cornmeal.
Yeah.
But there have been some really fascinating studies of basically allowing people to eat freely from foods that are just whole foods and they're not processed, and people don't actually gain weight when they are just eating whole foods. Whereas if you give them free access to processed foods, they'll balloon up like they'll skyrocket their weight because the brain is being bypassed. It's being short circuited. So
Yeah.
so whole foods are going to be huge.
Yeah, what I find in to so as a health coach, I actually got my start by teaching cooking classes and just teaching people how to make healthy foods taste good. And I taught cooking classes up until the pandemic and when we couldn't do that anymore. What people are always amazed by, one, is I make it really easy on purpose because as I was on my health journey, I would be spending 2.5, 3 hours in the kitchen, $50 recipe back in, 2014. So freaking expensive. And it tasted like crap. Like, I'm just like, this is the most bland thing on the planet. So I made it my mission. I would take these recipes and I'm like, how can I get the bare minimum and add more flavor? So it's like, my goal is always 5 ingredients plus herbs and spices. Some of my best recipes are literally just vegetables and some herbs and salt. Like, because my kids don't like pepper, it's spicy. So I learned not to eat pepper with food. And what I find is that people think of cooking as something
Mm.
complicated and something time consuming and something bland. And really, what it is people just don't know how to cook. They think of vegetables as what we grew up with in the 80s, where it was like frozen broccoli that was boiled and kind of mushy. As I'm having a coughing attack in the middle of the interview, I'm taking advantage of the unnatural break to talk about my meal plan programs and one on one coaching. You've heard how I develop my recipes and my passion behind the development of my meal plans and coaching. I want to make eating for your long term health as easy and delicious as possible. It isn't hard when you know what to do and how it looks like in real life. I work with people who are dealing with more mild chronic illnesses like metabolic disorder and food sensitivities, all the way to more debilitating chronic illnesses like autoimmune disease, mold toxicity, histamine intolerance, SIBO, and more. I have a gift to take any set of dietary restrictions and develop recipes and meal plans around them. My goal is to always encourage, give hope, and make eating more than just a way of getting calories. It should be enjoyable. I also guide on how to get off of a therapeutic diet and onto a long-term way of eating full of variety and a bit more flexibility. You can learn more about my individual meal plans and my coaching program in the links in the show notes. Let's get back to learning from Joe.
So, Marian, while you're, I've actually been coughing too, and I've been off screen here. So, what you're saying there is so key because when I was the first 5 years after my wife and I got married, this was about a 5 year period where I wasn't living on a farm. We were living in Spokane, Washington, and I actually taught nutrition classes in low income elementary schools.
Ooh,
And what I would do is I would actually come in there with a little rolling cart and we would cook with the kids. And we would just show them like it's not actually that hard to cook food because a lot of these kids, these are kids where, maybe 90 to 95% are getting free and reduced lunch. So they're coming from from a background of poverty. And when you have a background of poverty, you really know how to use the microwave oftentimes, and that's about it. And so just showing them like you can take like two, three ingredients and you can make it taste amazing and amazing in a different way than processed food does. Processed
yeah.
food, you usually have some form of regret after you eat something that maybe tasted good at the time, but then afterwards you're like, oh, why did I eat that? But whole foods, well prepared so that they're delicious. Very rarely cause like that digestive that digestive
Yeah.
sorrow that comes after pigging out on something that wasn't actually that good for you.
Yeah.
So making preparing food at home is actually one of the best ways. It's so hard to find anything healthy at a restaurant because
Yeah.
restaurants want you to come back, and so they're going to try to hook you some way. And
Yeah.
generally, those hooks are not the things that are the best for you. Now, there are exceptions
That
to that, but
Yeah. So I will say that when people have never cooked vegetables before and they don't know what they like and they don't like, at least here in Phoenix, we have a lot of really healthy focused restaurants. Yeah, they use seed oils and certain stuff, but it's a low risk way to try new vegetables.
sure.
And so I will give them kind of a list of like health centric restaurants in their area and say, if you've never tried Brussels sprouts before, go and get them as a side dish,
Yep. Yeah, that's great.
and
Absolutely.
so that's kind of my thing is like, because people will buy stuff and they're like, I want to, but they second guess themselves and they're kind of just scared of failing.
Yep.
And so, or they're like, oh, I'm not going to like it and it's a waste of money. Well, it's a waste of money if you throw it in the trash. But so if you go to a restaurant, yeah, spend 20, 25 bucks, but you get to try a couple different vegetables that maybe you've never had before. You
Sure.
get to
Yeah,
find out if you like them or not. And I always say you like most vegetables, you just have to have them cooked in a way that you like.
that's correct.
And that's really, really what it is. And then for those people who are really stubborn, I'm a big fan of the powdered vegetables,
Sure.
or capsule form, because if you just ingest them, all of a sudden people will find, why the heck am I craving a salad? And then they
Mm,
eat a salad and they're like, that was the most amazing thing on the
mm,
planet.
yeah.
So it's just like just getting them in. And modern nutrition, we have to fight against the hyper palatable, ultra processed food, but also the busy schedule and
Yep.
the thought that cooking takes a long time. Most of my meals are 15 minutes or less, and that includes chopping.
Wow.
Most of the time, I buy pre-chopped vegetables and then I just kind of make them
Right.
smaller because they come like huge. Because, yeah, I mean, I have a 17-year-old who's going to and from work that I'm teaching how to drive. I have a 13-year-old who's in volleyball. I have a 9-year-old who's in soccer. I have a 1-year-old who just screams and pushes me away from the cabinet because I'm not giving her attention. And so,
Sure.
like, And I've been that, I mean, it's been crazy. Even when it was just me and my two kids, like I'm like, how can I make this as fast as possible? Because I want to, we have homework and we have this and we have that. And it's like you can make it, or I stick it in the oven and then 30 minutes later, ding, dinner's ready. And we've been doing all this stuff in between, and people just think that it's just so difficult. And my best recipes are 5 ingredients or less. Some of them are three,
Yep.
and it's really just a matter of knowing what the temperature is, knowing what herbs taste good together
Hmm.
and what fat to cook in. And from
Yep.
there, it tastes amazing.
Yep. Yep. No, you've got it. You've got it down exactly. And in your little hack there about trying new vegetables at different restaurants, as like an introduction, like, hey, if they're gonna obviously prepare them in a way that they hope to get repeat customers. So they
Yeah.
probably know what they're doing. That's a good idea.
Thank you. I had to do that myself. So it was from personal experience. Like I'm like, I cannot find a way to eat butternut squash that I like. I do not know why everything is butternut squash. I don't like it. I still have I have actually a butternut squash soup that I make and I actually like. But do I eat it chopped up in a salad after it's been roasted? No, I think it tastes gross. I like acorn squash better. It's more mild. I think butternut squash just doesn't taste good. I don't know.
Yeah.
It tastes like baby food, like ugh. And some people like baby food, that's fine. But like I don't like it for the most part. But I've even found ways that I do like it, you
Sure.
know?
Sure.
So it's
Absolutely.
like removing the, yeah, just removing the risk because people are so afraid of failing. It's so weird to me. I don't get
Yeah.
it. Like, because it's part of the process. And like, if you don't like it, then you can just DoorDash.
Yeah.
Like if it's a fail, like you can DoorDash or pull a frozen pizza out of your freezer,
That's
right?
right. You
Like,
you should at least be willing to know what doesn't work, because then you've got one less thing you'll try in the future, that
yeah.
way. So like, yeah, growing up, boiling your broccoli till it's a mush is like, I'm not sure where that came from, but I know I've heard that from lots of people that that was their experience. Um, but I think thinking about nutrient density is also very key because
Yeah.
you've got like, things like your vegetables, depending on how you define nutrient density. Vegetables play a really important role in like delivering fiber and micronutrients and whatnot, but they're generally, they're not the main delivery of calories and whatnot. And so making sure that
Right.
you're picking foods that are nutrient dense is really key. And that's where dairy is one of the areas that I am a huge proponent of course, because I live on a dairy. But what we have found is that with things like goats, you get all the nutrient density of dairy without all of the side effects of cow dairy. Now, why people have all of these, why they're so allergic and sensitive and intolerant of cow dairy, there's all kinds of theories as to why that is. But one of the things that we found is that with goats, and this is why oftentimes goat milk works so well as if prepared as a part of a formula for infants, is that goat milk actually on a DNA level actually matches up with breast milk very, very closely, much closer than cow milk does. And so
Yeah.
there's some theories that that's one of the reasons why people tolerate goat milk so much better. But dairy really is one of these amazing ingredients out there that too many people just like swear off dairy because of the side
Yeah.
effects, and then they miss out on, you know, oat milk and soy milk and those kinds of things. They're not milks. They're a milk. They're an imitation of it because dairy is one of the, I think, one of the greatest foods out there that oftentimes
Yeah.
people leave behind for very understandable reasons if it's wrecking their gut or that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
so that's
So
that's
I
like a
I
huge
can't
part.
tolerate I can't tolerate cow's dairy. I can do butter, as long as I don't use too much. Like I can't do butter in my coffee, when that was a big thing, the bulletproof thing. I can't even do raw milk because it flares up my psoriasis. I tried it, raw
Yep.
cow's milk, but I can do goat milk.
Yep.
When my son was born, 17 and a half years ago, there were no goat milk formulas in the US. And then with my second born, I used a powdered goat milk like formula recipe. She
Hmm.
only got one bottle a day. I wasn't too concerned. Well, my third would not take breast milk from a bottle. Like she
Mm.
was like, this is the wrong delivery system. And
Right.
so for me to be able to have a little bit of a life and take care of my other kids and all of that, and to continue coaching and all that, she had to take a bottle. So we did Kendamil, goat milk
Hmm. Sure.
formula for her. And that made me feel so much better because I knew on a DNA level it was, so similar. And I knew she would get the nutrition that she needed. Not that she got a lot, but it's like if she's not going to take liquid gold, then she can take, liquid silver, basically.
Yeah.
And, I knew that it was much less likely to be a problem for her because my
Sure.
son, he cannot, like, I had to cut out cow's milk for him,
Hmm.
which then resolved my psoriasis I'd struggled with my whole life and my bloating and cystic acne and all of that. And so now I'm pregnant again, and goat milk and goat cheese and all of that is like my lifesaver because I'm craving it like no other,
Yeah.
and
Congratulations.
thank you. Thank you. Yep, we're gonna have five and then I'm done. I'm
Okay.
41. I'm good. But my husband could totally have more and I'm like, you can have more. I'm done. But goat milk and all of that, like my son can't really, he shouldn't have dairy. So I'm trying to introduce him to goat milk and stuff so it doesn't flare up his immune stuff. But then my daughters and all of them, they're good.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do I get so I go organic and
Yeah.
all of that for them to get, as much nutrients as possible. And we always do whole milk everything.
Yep.
That's the healthiest version,
Yeah.
really.
So, and this is going to be tough in Arizona, but one of the only thing I for a long time organic milk, and this actually you get this with the goat milk as well. But one of the problems with fresh goat milk that you find in like the grocery store or fresh organic milk that you find in the grocery store is oftentimes instead of being pasteurized, it's been ultra pasteurized. And
Hmm.
the reason for the ultra pasteurization is that the market is much smaller for something like liquid goat milk or even organic goat milk or organic cow milk, although it's bigger now than it used to be. But I would just really encourage your listeners when they want to go organic or even go if they want to try goat milk, look for options that are not ultra pasteurized. And they do
Yeah.
exist out there. We have Trader Joe's up here and
Yeah.
they sell I mean it's pasteurized but it's not ultra pasteurized.
Yeah.
Um and so and I think that there's been some really interesting studies that show the effect of ultra pasteurized milk on the microbiome
Hmm.
that I think we'd be better off drinking conventional milk that's just been pasteurized than organic milk that's been ultra pasteurized. If I had to pick between the two, if those are my only two choices, that's what I'd be looking for. But there are organic options out there that aren't ultra pasteurized. They just can be a little harder to find.
Yeah. And it kind of goes to like, you got to know the farmer
Sure.
and you have to know where to shop.
Yep.
And I think that that's like the legwork that is so exhausting for people. So it's like one of those things you have to pick. So once you master movement and sleep, learning how to cook real food, then you can move on to things like this. And I remember reading that study that conventional regular pasteurized was better for you than organic than ultra pasteurized. And then there's the A1 A2 conversation, and
Yep.
there's just a lot out there. But what I find is if you're not having physically adverse reactions even with autoimmune disease and stuff, dairy is not something that should be avoided.
Yeah. Yep.
They're actually finding that stunted growth in adults like tends to be K2 deficiency. Well, what has K2? Dairy. And that's really, you can't get K2 from plants. It comes from dairy and dairy that's been in the sun and
Yep.
eating grass. And, you know,
There's a reason why the Dutch are the tallest people in the world. It's because, they just have this, we do work with some of the farmers in Holland because they produce a
ooh,
tremendous amount of goat milk, and in the EU they can't use any GMO feeds, and so it's a really nice it's a really nice relationship we've had, at least with our powdered milk.
hmm
But the Dutch, the Holland is a fifth the size of Washington State, which is where we're from, and yet they produce twice as much goat milk as the entire United States. So they're just incredibly productive people. But because they have a culture that is surrounded by both cow dairy and goat dairy, they reach their full growth potential because of, I think, in a large part because of the dairy. So yeah, dairy is a superfood in a lot of ways, and cow dairy can be very problematic for people,
hmm
and not the least of which the A1 or the alpha S1 casein protein issue that people have, where they get highly sensitive to that is definitely something to be avoided. But back to the kind of beginning where we started with the sustainable agricultural idea, one of the things that's important to think about when you think about packaged food is the time of from field to a nutrient capture. So, like for example, there's actually a lot of canned vegetables that have been preserved like 5 hours after they were picked. So
Yeah.
that can of beans, of green beans, might actually be far fresher than the beans that you're buying out of the refrigerator at the store.
Same with the
Yeah, and
freezers.
the freezer is
Like,
actually even better. The freezer is probably
yeah.
so frozen vegetables is one of the best things that you can do because the likelihood of that of those being trucked around and sitting for a long time, and you of the producers using ethylene gas to bring them to their full ripeness because they picked it too early in the field. Like
Hmm.
that doesn't actually happen as much with some of your processed vegetables like frozen and canned and whatnot because they're picking them at the peak and then they're processing them, and then you get them actually at a higher nutrient peak than. And so that actually happens a lot with like milk too. So like we do a
Mm.
powdered goat milk. Well, the powdered goat milk it's coming from Holland, which is a long way away. It's not exactly your local farmer, but it's being processed from the goat, and then it's immediately being dried using a low temperature spray dryer. Well, if you do it that way, that's going to be a whole lot different than the ultra pasteurized liquid milk that's been sitting on the shelf for 3 months.
Yeah.
So there are trade-offs, but it's important to think that just how it appears, you know, there how it appears on the shelf doesn't necessarily say how fresh it actually is. The
Yeah.
vegetables you're pulling out of the produce area might not be as fresh as you think they are.
Yeah. And it's so funny because people feel so much guilt and like they're not healthy enough when they're depending on like frozen vegetables and things like that. And I'm like, first of all, take advantage of every shortcut you can. Second of all, they are better for you than the stuff that's,
Oftentimes,
I
yeah.
mean, and yeah, oftentimes, I mean, not always, and we can only do our best, right?
Yep.
And we can only do the best with what we're given. Our bodies are incredibly resilient, but what we can do when we have the capacity is get to know our farmers,
Yep.
get to know our politicians, let them know what we want and be active in that because at the end of the day, they want to get reelected and us letting them know what we want and making our friends call them too. That's how we get the change where we get sustainable regenerative agriculture that's not poisonous with a bunch of chemicals. We're not having to deal with atrazine and glyphosate and
Yep.
you know, duquat, forget how you say it, but those are like the three most toxic and most common pesticides. And, that could be a whole other episode. But, at the end of the day, do what you can. Real food is better than processed food. It's more nutrient dense no matter what.
Mhm.
Don't be afraid of shortcuts because, for one, they've mastered the art of freezing food so that it doesn't turn to mush.
Yep.
You can even get frozen vegetables that you just dump out, put on a pan and stick in the oven and they come out somewhat crispy. They're not mush. And first of all, follow the directions on the package. If it says 375, do 375.
Yep.
Know that your oven actually gets that hot. Like mine, I have to put it about 15 degrees hotter for it to reach the actual temperature. So there's certain things, but that's all nuanced stuff. But at the end of the day, get to know your farmer, get to know your politician, and from there, we will be able to change things from the ground up. And hopefully, I kind of thought I always had a black thumb, but I'm actually keeping roses alive and they're actually blooming. So I'm like, huh, well, maybe I can help my husband keep a garden.
Yeah.
We could do a little backyard garden. And, I
Do you guys
think
have
that
chickens?
no, nope, not yet. I don't think our HOA allows them. I don't know if I'm ready for that just yet.
So I live on a farm with 500 goats, and the goats are our livelihood. But if I could only have one animal, it'd be chickens because you just take all of those food scraps and you just turn them back into eggs. And eggs
Yeah,
are another just like perfect food that
yeah,
you actually never have to buy eggs from the store. You can have
yeah,
for most people, 6 chickens will produce all the eggs that they'll ever need.
yeah.
And HOAs, chickens can be pretty low profile. Just don't get a rooster.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because being pregnant and they know that I am. And so what I found, I watched this interview talking about choline. And if you do triple the RDA for pregnant women, they find that intelligence goes up significantly. But people don't realize that eggs are the number one source of choline. And it's not just in utero and infants and toddlers who need choline. We need it all throughout our lives for our brains. And the whole fear around cholesterol in eggs, which is so dumb because it really doesn't have that much. That whole thing just makes me nuts. Like eggs and dairy are the two superfoods. Like one of the things I find with plants is yes, they're nutrients, but kale, like with the oxalates and all of that, and same with sweet potato, like oh, there's always all these things. But when it comes to eggs and dairy, like they're the only downside is if you're allergic. Other than
Sure.
that, it's only health
Yep.
benefits.
Yep.
And, with intelligence, with brain elasticity, with your nervous system being healthy, and then of course full growth potential and all of that, like, and depriving children of whole milk when little kids need so much cholesterol
Hmm.
and they're just depriving them of that cholesterol,
Yep.
and it's just absolutely heartbreaking for me.
Well,
And I think that a lot of,
it's actually somewhat criminal when you consider
yeah,
some of the reasons behind why they do it and why they refuse to change in spite of like all the data showing like, hey, this is so antiquated. You know,
yeah.
this is like from the 70s. Like, let's go. Let's get things back up in time.
Well, even then, like even in the 70s, the science, the nutrition science that showed the risk benefit analysis was always in the favor of the food. It was just who had the money
Yep.
to fight it, which I think is just like everybody's like, "Oh, follow the science." And I'm like, "Well, then follow the actual science."
Sure. Yeah. Right.
You know,
Right.
like
Yep.
um but yeah. So I have questions like how do I get some of your powdered goat milk? And and if people want to maybe learn from you or connect with you, how do they get connected?
Sure. Yeah. So Mount Capra is our company. Capra is the Latin word for goat, and we're located in the Pacific Northwest here, where there's lots and lots of mountains. There is no official Mount Capra out here except for us, in the hill we farm on. But yeah, mountcapra.com, that's M as in Mary, T as in Tom, CAPRA.com is where you'll find all of our product line. So we do everything that you could think of that would come from goat. So we do goat milk proteins. We do of course just powdered milk. We have one of our most popular products here is called goat colostrum. It's
Ooh.
the only goat colostrum that's we've been doing this for 20 years. I mean, we've been doing the goat colostrum for 20 years now, long before it was ever like a super trendy food item. We've been around since the 20s. So we're coming up on 100 years ourselves as a company.
How
So
cool.
yeah, mountcapra.com, check us out there. And we actually have we produce a goat milk ghee, which is a clarified butter, which would be interesting to see if that if you were able to do all your cooking, because ghee is doesn't have any of the doesn't have any protein, lactose, water, so you can do high heat cooking with it, like 450
Mhm.
degrees without so it's got a really high smoke point. Um, but you get all the great flavors of ghee. But it's actually even goat milk is interesting because if you like, it's a hit or miss for people whether or not they like
Yeah.
goat or not. But if you like goat, then our goat milk ghee is it actually won the Good Food Award back in 2018 when we first came out with it, and
Cool.
just because it's so good. So, anyways, that's where you can find us, and yeah, we'd love to definitely have any of your listeners come check it out.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just thank you for your time and discussion. I like I said, I was kind of just geeking out and I just really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah, thank you, Marian, for having me, and blessings on that new baby. One last thing I'll say is
Yeah.
we're about ready to launch. I'm not sure when this will go live to your listeners, but we're about ready to launch an initiative that where we're petitioning the federal government to actually create a emergency infant formula recipe
Mm,
for parents to have access to. Right now, the FDA is very adamant that you never make homemade formula, which
yeah.
I understand. There's a lot of formulas out there. Many of them are not good, but we actually want to see parents have the informed choice to be able to make a formula in the event of an emergency. If you remember back in
Yeah.
2022, there was this infant formula shortage.
Yep.
And it was a very scary time for people, and a lot of people ran online and found formulas. And I have all of this nutrition experience. I created a formula back in 2014 for my daughter that I've used and thousands of parents have used it. We don't offer it anymore because the FDA got involved and they're like, hey, you need to stop telling people about this. And so we're going to be launching a website that has nothing to do with Mount Capra at all. It's just my personal website where I'm basically petitioning local leaders, state leaders, and federal leaders to essentially come up with a shared emergency formula recipe in the event that there is no formula on the shelves, so that parents don't go find the first thing that comes up on Google or whatnot. So,
Uh, I definitely, when that comes out, please let me
okay.
know.
Yeah.
And then, because I would love to be part of that effort.
Sure.
I mean, I have to, I'm just that, the whole reason I could get Kendamil was because of that shortage and they allowed imports from Europe.
Yep.
And in Europe, they don't allow seed oils.
Yep.
They don't, I mean, I'm looking at the ingredients and I'm even looking at like Happy Hearts, which is a US based one, and all the seed oils and all the
Yep.
sugar and all the corn syrup solids. And the European formula was just so far superior. And I'm just like, I don't understand why it's mandatory to have seed oils in formula.
Yeah.
But yeah, if there's a shortage, we need like
You need
actual good
options.
information. Yeah. Like for my daughter, when I made her own, like, I mean, thank God it was only one bottle a day,
Sure.
but it's like if she had to depend on that, I mean, I did a Weston A. Price,
Sure. Yep. I'm very familiar with it.
one. Yeah, but it's like, yeah, we need something for
Yep.
that,
Yep.
because stuff happens.
So that's an
And
entire podcast episode right there, Marian. Just
yeah,
talking
well,
about infant
I
formula.
would love
So,
to have you back to
okay.
talk about that because I think that it's just so important and it is a passion of mine. And I think that it would be so important. So I'd love to have you back and we can definitely talk about that. But yes, so mountcapra.com, I'll
Yep.
have that in the show notes.
Great.
And then, when you launch your initiative, please let me know and
Okay.
I'll help promote it any way I can.
Sounds great. Well, it's been wonderful to chat with you. And again, blessings on that new baby and your family.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you found this episode helpful, would you do me a favor and help others find it by leaving a review, sharing a screenshot on social media, or sharing the link with a friend? By you sharing what you've learned, others are able to find this podcast and join our community. Be sure to check out my website, www.roadtolivingwhole.com, for over 160 delicious recipes, a variety of meal plans, and a blog packed full of even more healthy living tips. If you'd like to learn more about how to work with me as your coach, you can schedule a free consult through www.roadtolivingwhole.com/health-coaching/. Until next time, friend. Bye.